to hear from you. If you or someone you know has been affected by mental illness, maybe it's a family member or a friend, have you had the support you need? What would you do to improve mental health services where you live? So please give me a call on 0345 6060 973. This is Nick Clegg on LBC, and it all starts next.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, the Home Secretary has defended the decision to scrap relocation powers for monitoring terror suspects. Labour claims the move could have led to the likes of the extremist known as Jihadi John joining the Islamic State group. Theresa May has confirmed that exit checks at ports and airports are being brought in next month to identify suspected extremists who are leaving the UK. But General Secretary of the Immigration Services Union, Lucy Morton, has told LBC it will have little impact.
It's unlikely to make any difference simply because of the nature of when the data is gathered and how that's provided to us. This isn't actual physical people standing on the border checking people as they leave. This is a means of data exchange so that we can gather that information.
Sunderland footballer Adam Johnson has been arrested on suspicion of having sex with an underage girl. The England winger has been suspended by his club. LBC's Marie Christopher has more from our North East newsroom.
Johnson remains in custody after being arrested by Durham police earlier. The 27-year-old is being held on suspicion of having sex with a girl under the age of 16. The club have suspended him pending the outcome of the police investigation. The midfielder, who's played for England 12 times, was due to travel with the squad for their game with Hull tomorrow.
Police are questioning two people on suspicion of murdering a missing teenager in Bristol. Becky Watts in the southeast, but some scattered wintry showers overnight, lows of 3 Celsius. A windy night with wintry showers across the UK. The greatest risk of snow in western Scotland. Further rain and sleet tomorrow, especially for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also sunny spells, particularly in England and Wales, and highs of 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
I'm Mark Rise in the LBC Travel Centre. A302 Victoria Street is partly blocked in both directions due to a cycling demonstration around Thirlby Road and Palace Street. There's congestion to Vauxhall Bridge Road and Victoria Station. In Leighton, very slow traffic and one lane's blocked due to an accident involving 2 vans on the A12 southbound at Lee Interchange. And the A13 is queuing out of town between the Canning Town flyover and the Beckton roundabout after an accident just before the roundabout earlier. The M25 is queuing anti-clockwise into the Dartford Tunnel from back past junction 2, the A2, and it's still very busy at junction 12 of the M25 anti-clockwise heading into the roadworks down on the M3 southbound. In Leicestershire, the M1 still closed southbound between junction 20 at Lutterworth and junction 18 at Rugby due to a serious accident. Because of the accident, the M6 is queuing southbound from the Corley services to the M1. Nottinghamshire, the A1 is closed southbound due to a serious accident between the A638 and Newark Road at the Tuxford junction. Eurostar services are back up and running, but with delays and cancellations between London and Paris after an earlier investigation. Keeping you moving, your next travel updates in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With GoToMeeting. Work smarter with a free 30-day trial.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. State of Mind with Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg.
The scale of mental health problems is huge in our country. 1 in 4 of our fellow citizens will have to struggle with mental health problems at one point in their lives, and yet it's for far, far too long been a Cinderella service, slightly brushed under the carpet. People have treated mental health issues with sort of foot shuffling embarrassment. It's been a bit of a taboo subject.
My name's Sarah, I'm 18. I suffer with an eating disorder called selective eating, so it's like really, really severe fussy eating. It's coming out in the media at the moment, but it's coming out more as like Metro articles. People like, look at this weirdo, she only eats this, she doesn't eat that kind of thing.
I think it's extremely important that we try even harder to focus on early recognition and treatment of all kinds of mental health conditions in young people.
It's time we kind of lift the veil, lift the lid on mental health and treat people suffering from mental health problems with the same compassion, the same support, the same clinical excellence as we have provided to people with physical health problems for many, many years.
State of Mind with Nick Clegg on LBC.
Good evening. Welcome to this special programme looking at what I think is one of the most pressing issues we face as a country. 1 in 4 people in Britain will experience a mental health problem each year with a knock-on cost to the economy of £100 billion. And one of the most shocking statistics that I've heard over the course of investigating this problem is that it affects 3 children in every classroom. I mean, you heard that correctly. 3 children in every classroom has a mental health condition. But how are we dealing with this challenge as a country, and how can we improve things for those at the sharp end? So I'd like to hear from you if you have been affected by any of this. Maybe you work in the emergency services. How much of your shift is taken up by people who are suffering from mental illness? If you've been affected by mental illness yourself, I'd very much like to hear from you. Maybe it's a family member or a friend who's had to grapple with mental health issues. What support was there for you and for them? You can get in touch with me directly on 0345 6060 973. You can text me 84850 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. And of course, you can watch live on lbc.co.uk. But before I go to your calls, I'd like to talk to Louise Atkinson, whose brother committed suicide after a long struggle with depression. Her mother subsequently experienced mental health problems while trying to cope with the grief, and Louise has also suffered mental health problems herself. Louise is now, amongst other things, a fundraiser with Mind, the mental health charity. Louise, good evening.
Hello, Nick. Hi.
Louise, thanks for coming on to this programme. I can't imagine it is easy at all, but you've been very brave. You wanted to use your experience and what happened to Ian to tell me more about it, to sort of lift some of the mystery or embarrassment which surrounds mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the main reasons why I've sort of agreed and been brave enough to speak out is because I feel very much that Ian deserves understanding and not judgment, and that as a society and also, as a health service, that we stop thinking about mental illness as something that's selfish or something that can be mind over matter, or all of those sort of taboo and stigmatised ideas that we tend to have. Ian's story really was that he suffered with depression for about 8 years before he died. During that time, he had various highs and lows, ups and downs, times when he was really quite unwell, and other times when he managed fairly well, really. He did attempt to take his own life fairly soon after his depression started.
How old was he then?
He was 27 at the time, and he was in hospital for about. And I'm not saying that that's the case at all for everybody who suffers, but.
And what kind of support did you and your family get?
Well, not a great deal, but really Ian chose not to engage with services for the majority of the time that he was ill. He was quite clear about that decision himself, and he didn't really seek any help up until about a year before he died, we were actually at a point when he'd had a very rough patch, and I said to him, you really need to get some help with this. We can't do this on our own anymore. And I was quite bossy with him, really. And he did.
If I understand it correctly, he confided most particularly in you, didn't he?
Yes, we were very close, and he was very not secretive but private, I suppose, about his depression, and very few people knew. He had this amazing ability to cover it up. I mean,
and do you think, again, so impossible to try and imagine things differently, but do you think if we as a country and as a society talked more openly about mental health, the way and indeed other individuals sort of hide sometimes mental health issues, do you think that would in itself help a bit? And also, how have people reacted to you subsequent to that? Because
Yeah, I mean, there is undoubtedly this kind of shroud of shame which hangs over mental illness, and which people feel, there's this feeling that you need to be ashamed of it, or that you need to snap out of it, or that you need to stop being self-indulgent, or, I have felt that. I've subsequently, since Ian died, I've struggled with depression myself. And I personally have felt that from other people, or not necessarily from individuals, but from society in general, that, I need to get over this. This is, I should be able to cope better. I shouldn't be feeling like this. And it's ridiculous, because you wouldn't say that to somebody with
about a physical condition. No, Louise, thanks so much. I'm keen, obviously, to take other calls, but can I just? I think I'm sure everyone who's listening to this will be really very grateful for your courage and honesty for coming on. I know it can't be easy, so thank you very, very much. And I know what you've said, Louise, about your own experiences has provoked some people to get in touch. So our first caller is Rachel. Rachel in Covent Garden. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Nick. My question is, why are GPs not given adequate and up-to-date training and information required to help patients with depression? I've had clinical depression for 15 years, and only now at 31 have I finally been given the right drugs that have finally sort of helped me out of it, more than any other time, because I was actually only finally able to, through work, use Bupa. But every other time through seeing GPs on the NHS, they've never had any idea. Some of them are just downright rude. They don't acknowledge depression. They don't give support about depression. They might just pick a random antidepressant out of the air and give it to you. There's no specialism there. They should be referring you to a specialist, the same as any other serious illness.
Yeah, well, I'm sure other people who will call in will be familiar with that. I think we've got a long way to go to reverse what has been not only years but generations of treating mental health as a sort of Cinderella service in the NHS, and for mental health issues not to be researched or given the same kind of esteem or indeed the same resources as physical health. But just tell me a bit more, Rachel. When you saw GPs in the past, you felt they just didn't take what you said seriously, or?
No, not at all. And they still don't actually. No, they don't take it seriously. You don't have enough time with them, obviously. You only get about 5 minutes. They don't really, they're just, they assess that you're depressed. You might have to fill out a questionnaire, or they'll ask you a few questions. They might say, okay, yeah, you're depressed, so we can try an antidepressant. Let's try this one. They choose a certain one. They don't give you any, but they don't usually refer you to therapy. You have to ask about that yourself.
Yeah. Well, look, Rachel, I'm delighted to hear you've at least now found your way to the right kind of treatment. But I'm sure what you said is resonates with a lot of people. And we'll take more callers after the travel break, when I'd like to look at the impact.
Is the only number you need for any number you want. 118434, the handy number for handy numbers.
Calls cost 76 pence plus £1.53 per minute from a BT landline. Other networks vary and mobiles cost considerably more.
If you're a mummy or a daddy and you smoke in the car, you probably don't know that over 80% of cigarette smoke is invisible. That means that even if you smoke out of the car window, smoke could be blowing back in and dangerous chemicals could still be getting into my lungs. Nasty stuff like carbon monoxide, arsenic and cyanide. If you could see all the poisons in your car, you wouldn't smoke.
Search Smoke Free for free support.
What about this one, love?
Is it semi-detached?
Yeah.
Is it 3 bedrooms?
Uh-huh.
Does it have an ensuite?
Yeah.
Gas central heating?
Uh-huh.
Garden?
Yep.
South-facing?
Yeah.
Conservatory?
Yep.
Does it have a walk-in wardrobe?
It's got a shed.
It's difficult enough choosing the right house. At NatWest, we now have some of our lowest ever mortgage rates, so at least choosing your mortgage will be easy. We can even tell you how much you could borrow in just 10 minutes. Book an appointment today to see how much you could save with a NatWest mortgage, or search NatWest Mortgages.
The Vista of Venice, recognised throughout the world. But add in the sounds of the Grand Canal at first light, and it's unforgettable. It's these small finishing touches that make a huge difference. For the ultimate finishing touch for your home, use SureSet's permeable paving. Guaranteed for 15 years, it adds a classic touch to your home. Stunning, permeable paving from SureSet. To find out more, visit suresetfinish.com.
It's that time of year again. Time to turn the lights down low, light the candles, and be seduced by a dazzling French model. Like the Renault Clio, with up to £1,500 deposit contribution at 6.9% APR representative during Renault Romance season. Ooh la la. 6.9% APR representative, ordered and registered by 31st of March 2015 at participating dealers only. Finance provided by Renault Finance, subject to status and over 18s. T's and C's apply. See renault.co.uk/offers.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Well, let's speak first with someone we're just going to call Mike. He left the University of Westminster some years ago.
I left a couple of years before Jihadi John. There was a number of groups that operated within campus that the authorities did not know about.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Every weekday morning from 7 on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, with over 2,000 hotels worldwide.
Good evening. Welcome back. You're listening to Nick Clegg on LBC with a special programme looking at the issue of mental health. An area which has been important to me and made a big impact is the issue of children's mental health. It's not an easy subject to discuss, but it does affect many, many people. So do give me a call on 0345 6060973 if you've gone through this as a parent or as a child. One area which regularly gets overlooked is eating disorders. Astonishingly, anorexia kills more people than any other mental health condition, and last year 25% of all expenditure for all young people who went into hospital with a mental health condition was spent on eating disorders. So it's a huge problem, but there is help available. The Tavistock Centre in Swiss Cottage is a place where young people can go to find that help, and earlier this year I went to meet some of those teenagers who are using the service.
My name's Sarah, I'm 18. I suffer with an eating disorder called selective eating. So it's like really, really severe fussy eating. And so it's the kind of thing that's really it's coming out in the media at the moment, but it's coming out more as like metro articles. People like, look at this weirdo, she only eats this, she doesn't eat that kind of thing. My issues is mainly diagnosis. So I was taken to the doctor when I was 6, and then when I was 9, and then when I was 10 and I was 14, and they never picked up a problem. They told me I'd grow out of it. And so I just feel like doctors are really hesitant to diagnose problems in young people.
I'm here because almost exactly a year, it was about almost a year ago, wasn't it, to the day, I came here and spoke to some young people who spoke with very striking honesty and candour about the treatment they'd received and the problems they were grappling with, and it made a massive impression on me, and since then I'm obviously trying to be push through some changes. So anyway, I'm coming back a year later and hopefully meeting not I think exactly the same, but some other young service users, so I get to hear about their personal experience.
We do a group.
Yeah, we do a group one.
Let's try and crowd in.
As a child in primary school, I was forced to sit at the table and finish my food, and if it was to the point of me throwing up, they would force me to do it anyway. And dinner ladies wouldn't let me leave the table because they didn't understand that there was something more wrong with me than just being a fuss eater. And a fuss eater, you can just force them to eat things and they'll be fine. I had a friend who broke a collarbone or something, and our form tutor got us all together and we all got a big get well card, it was giant, and we all were get well,
smiley faces,
and then yeah. And then I had a friend who attempted suicide, and it was just hushed, don't talk about it, don't mention it, and on the same thing, that's kind of.
It's partly because people are embarrassed and they're frightened of it, they don't understand, isn't it? I mean, so the more we can just get people talking about. Well, as you are obviously very admirably about mental health in the same way we do as physical health, it'll take away that. I mean, that's such a great example. So a great get well card for someone who's got a physical health problem, but no get well card from the same group of people for a mental health problem.
Oh, I see.
Yes, all right. Do that again. Right, ready. Look here, ready? Speaking to young teenagers with eating disorders, anorexia, with committed self-harm, listening to them directly about why they were not listened to. Sometimes, and this is some of the most painful things to hear from their own family, their own friends. A lot, for instance, this morning from many of them about how they wish they'd been able to talk more openly to their teachers about it at school. So how do we give teachers the self-confidence, as well as friends and family, to talk about mental health in an unembarrassed and confident way, that in itself would make a huge difference. And so look, all of that for me is so valuable, because I learn more from listening to them than I would reading any number of documents from think tanks or officials about what we need to do to really give mental health the priority that it deserves. So that was on a visit to the Tavistock Centre, which is an incredible place doing phenomenal work. And Sarah Hullier, who we just heard on that clip, is with me here now. Sarah, thanks so much for coming into the studio. Looking
sick enough, and like some of the girls who were talking about anorexia, they don't feel anorexic enough. If they're not skinny enough, they're not ill enough. And so I think it needs to be kind of at a state where you can feel like you can go to the doctor and they will validate your problems. Not that you'll go and they'll tell you you're not sick enough, because that's how you feel anyway. I think it's so important that doctors will pick up that you say you think something's wrong, and they'll understand that for you to go there and say that to them, there's definitely something very wrong.
And what about when you're at school with your classmates and teachers, and how, I mean, obviously very articulate about it now, but how was it? I mean, would they kind of try and sort of avoid the subject? I mean, did you
primary school, it was a bigger problem, because eating was more of a thing. That doesn't work. But it's like a group. It was dinner ladies, and you had to go and get your dinner. Right. They would all look at your plate as you were eating, and it was kind of more obvious. Whereas by the time I got to secondary school, no one would have known about it. Only my close friends I would have told. I think I barely even told any of my teachers. And I've suffered with anxiety, but it's only recently I've realised that that's what it was. I think from other people I've spoken to, that's quite a general thing. You don't realise that not everyone gets that anxious about things, but it's all kind of connected. But from my secondary school experience, I didn't tell anyone. It was close friends. I think teachers really knew. And then I moved for sixth form, and it was there that I was kind of realising I had some kind of sort of anxiety problem. And I had a particular experience that stands out in my mind, where we had a teacher who would make you stand at the front of the class and speak at the beginning of the lesson. So she had a software. Oh God, if she's listening, I'm really sorry. And she would pick a name out of a hat, and you'd have to go up and speak for 3 minutes about what was in the rest of the last lesson's lesson. And if you didn't do well enough, she would get the other students to throw bits of paper at you. And so it kind of, I managed it for a few weeks, and then I went to her, it took a lot for me to go to her and be like, I don't feel up to it, can you take my name out of the thing? And then in the lesson, someone noticed my name had been taken out, and they asked her there and then, why is Sarah not in there? And all the students were like, that's not fair, and so she put me back in. And so even though I'd gone to her and told her I really didn't feel up to it,
How did you feel about that?
Awful. If you can't turn to your teachers, who can you turn to? And so I think one of my big things is that teachers need to be, obviously we can't expect them to be mental health professionals, but they need to know.
They're given the kind of confidence to look for telltale signs.
And to understand how to treat.
What was a sort of turning point for you in terms of, obviously you ended up at the Tavistock Centre, and I mean, how did you end up there, and how?
I don't have treatment at the Tavistock Centre. The reason I was there is I volunteer for a charity called Young Minds. So I'm an activist, and I got to a stage in my life when I realised this wasn't okay, and that if someone needed to say something about it, I decided I was going to be the one to do it. And Young Minds is an amazing charity. They have young ambassadors who go and talk about these things, and so I think that was one of the key moments when I realised that I was going to.
Well, it's a fantastic thing you've done. Can you just stay there, Sarah? I'm just going to go to Sarah in Brentwood. Sarah, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. Tell me about your experiences.
Well, I have actually got bipolar.
Right.
But I was diagnosed when I was 19 with an eating disorder because I was quite underweight. I was about 7.5 stone, and I thought I was fat, but obviously I wasn't. But I was convinced that I was fat. I went into a private hospital for a number of months, and I wasn't really getting any better because my depression was a lot worse than this. I mean, eating disorders there's a huge spectrum, really.
Of course.
And with me, I was showing eating disorder traits, but I didn't actually have an eating disorder. So I was then put on a different ward, and then I got better. But it's interesting listening to, because I work with eating disorders, so it's quite interesting.
So do you recognise a lot of what Sarah was saying? And
yeah, I do, yeah. I think it's important not getting a diagnosis and stuff like that. That's
and how do we help teachers? Because obviously that's a point that Sarah's made. How do we help teachers, in a sense, recognise their role in all of this?
I think, when somebody's suffering from an eating disorder, the first thing is obviously they're not eating, but our teacher's not going to see that, is there? But being quite vacant in class, not being able to concentrate is a huge thing when you're suffering with mental health issues, eating disorders and stuff like that. Noticing that the grades are going down, and just not being, when you're not eating, your brain's not getting all the nutrients it needs.
Sarah's nodding in agreement, so there's agreement between Sarah and Sarah, which suggests to me that you're both right onto something here. Look, thanks both of you very much for coming into the studio and calling in, Sarah. Thanks very much. This is Nick Clegg. I'm here for another half an hour taking your calls on mental health. So coming up after the news and travel, I'm going to look at the impact mental health has on our emergency services. So if you work for the emergency services, how much of an impact does mental illness have on what you do? Maybe you have a friend or a relative who's come into contact with the emergency services. What was their experience like and how could it have been improved? So we'll come to your stories on that shortly, but this is LBC at just gone 7:30. News time.
From Global's news being held this morning, the Deputy Prime Minister is investigating the state of Britain's mental health care in a special show live on LBC. Nick Clegg says thousands of people suffering from mental illness aren't being properly supported by the health service. You can also watch LBC's State of Mind on lbc.co.uk. LBC weather, mostly dry into this evening for London and the southeast, but some scattered wintry showers overnight, lows of 3 Celsius. A windy night with wintry showers across the UK, the greatest risk of snow in western Scotland. Further rain and sleet tomorrow, especially for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also sunny spells, particularly in England and Wales, and highs of 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
This is Adam Moore in the LBC Travel Centre. With still problems on Eurostar tonight. Lots of disruption at St Pancras, Ebbsfleet and Ashford International after a police investigation earlier. Southern have delays of up to 45 minutes between London Bridge and East Croydon and Crystal Palace. That's because of a signalling fault at Sydenham. That's also affecting Thameslink services. Delays southbound on the A12 at Leighton. A lane still blocked after an accident involving 2 vans at the Lee interchange. You're queuing through Camden at the moment. Camden Road, 1 lane shut after the traffic lights stopped working at the junction with Royal College Street. In Victoria, better news about Victoria Street, all back open now after a demo earlier. In Leicestershire, the M1 southbound is still shut between junction 20 and 19 Lutterworth and the Catthorpe interchange. It's been shut for most of the afternoon after a serious accident earlier. Air ambulance also on scene earlier. That's causing long delays. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With Go-To Meeting, pointing you to a better work-life balance.
Remembering every phone number you've ever called is not impressive. What is impressive is remembering to call 118434 whenever you need a number. 118434. It's the handy number for handy numbers.
Calls cost 76 pence plus £1.53 per minute from a BT landline. Other networks vary and mobiles cost considerably more.
It's that time of year again. Time to turn the lights down low, light the candles, and be seduced by a dazzling French model. Like the Renault Clio, with up to £1,500 deposit contribution at 6.9% APR representative during Renault Romance season. Ooh la la. 6.9% APR representative, ordered and registered by 31st of March 2015 at participating dealers only. Finance provided by Renault Finance, subject to status and over 18s. T's and C's apply. See renault.co.uk/offers.
A platinum diamond ring catches the light at every opportunity. But placed on the finger of the woman you love, it shimmers like never before. It's these small finishing touches that make a huge difference. For the ultimate finishing touch for your home, use SureSet's permeable paving. Guaranteed for 15 years, it'll make your home shine. Stunning, permeable paving from SureSet. To find out more, visit suresetfinish.com.
Nobody wants to wake up to a chilly home. So if your boiler breaks down, it's good to know that British Gas engineers are only a phone call away. And that 92% of our surveyed home care customers would recommend our services. To find out more, call 0800 009 4747 or search Home Care from British Gas. Conditions apply.
They say great drama stays with you. Well, join Sky TV online today and you'll get a free Samsung Galaxy Tab 4. So you can watch the best drama from the UK and US on Sky Atlantic, wherever you are. Including Game of Thrones, Season 5. But hurry, this offer ends 5th of March. Just thought I'd add a bit more drama there so you wouldn't forget. Search Sky Bundles to join online today. Sky. Believe in better.
Sky TV from £21.50 per month. Direct debit subject to status. £10 standard setup. Upfront payment required. Sky Go requires 3G, 4G or Wi-Fi. UK and ROI only. Minimum contract and further terms apply.
State of Mind with Nick Clegg on LBC.
I'm here for another 25 minutes here on LBC, and of course you can watch as ever live at lbc.co.uk. After 8, Clive Bull will be here taking more of your calls on mental health. So if you haven't had the chance to get through to me, don't worry, because the conversation will continue with Clive after 8. Now, in this section, I want to have a quick look at the impact that mental health has on the emergency services, and I'm obviously going to take some of your calls in a moment. But here to give us another perspective on this is Simon Cole, Chief Constable of Leicestershire Police, and was the ACPO lead on mental, the sort of lead of amongst the chief constables on mental health until April of last year. Simon, thank you very much for joining me. How much of your officers' time is taken up, do you think, dealing with people who have mental illness?
Well, there's lots of studies. I mean, somewhere between 25 to 40% of officer and staff's time in a variety of different ways, ranging from offenders. And if you look at the prison population, about 70% of the prison population have a mental ill health condition. If you look at our victims as well, quite often people who are vulnerable because of the situation they're in, sometimes that's exploited. So a significant amount of time taken up dealing with mental health and its consequences across the whole piece of our work, not just offenders, not just victims, the whole set of policing, really.
And I mean, there's been a lot of coverage in the newspapers about people being detained in police cells. That's
Absolutely,
clearly just the wrong place for people with mental illness.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, the requirement for places of safety is quite varied across the country. It's really, really important. If you broke your leg, you wouldn't dream of rushing you to the local police cell. It's a concrete box with bars in the window. It seems a bit bizarre to me that we're taking people to cells who are mentally ill.
Who need treatment.
Who need treatment and help.
Would you say that you mentioned earlier about prisons? Would you say that about people going to prison who actually need help rather than incarceration? Or
Yeah, I think so. And from April onwards, half of the population of England will be, when they go through police custody, there will be access to liaison and diversion schemes that look at mental health, do an assessment at that point, with some variations around things like autism and dementia and conditions that are changing as the population changes. And that's really important because there are clearly a number of people who are in prison and in police cells as we're signed for April. So that will mean half the population of England will have access to that. The early signs from the early adopter forces are really positive, that it gets a better solution earlier on so that people who are ill aren't being criminalised, but also so that we're identifying those who should be dealt with criminally.
Yeah, well, I'm starting to strongly agree with that and think we should extend that across the whole country as quickly as we can. So I'm just hold on there. Can we turn to a caller? Ravi in Harrow. Ravi, hello.
Hello, Nick. Yes, I was just wondering...
Is a conversation that more and more people are having around kitchen tables, in pubs at school gates. I mean, we've got a long way to go, but compared to what it was like a few years ago, have you had any of your own experiences in mental health, Ravi, to sort of back that up, so to speak?
Well, actually, I work as a mental health support worker, and I do face stigma against the clients that I work with every single day from members of the community. And I suppose... What kind of stigma, Ravi? Just sort of issues where, rather than the person that they are.
Well, look, another person, Ravi, who's with me here, who'd be able to give us a really good perspective on attitudes towards mental health, not least in the workplace, is John Binns, a senior partner at Deloitte, who has experienced mental health problems, who returned to work and has led a culture change within his own organisation. So, John, welcome to the show. Good evening. When did you start to realise that something was wrong?
It was around about 2006-07 when I had essentially what you would call a breakdown in layman's terms, and found myself off work for 3 months, being in a psychiatric hospital for 3 weeks, having been a very successful consulting partner in the Deloitte business, and feeling that my career would be over. But in practice it wasn't, and there was some quite good stuff about that experience that I'd happily share with you.
Well, do tell me, because this is now some years ago,
yes.
and Deloitte's a big corporate name. I mean, traditionally people wouldn't, expect that a workplace like that would be where, you would be, your issues would be properly dealt with and openly discussed. But your experience was quite different, which is great to hear.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, you're absolutely right, and one of the kind of the key things for me was that the sense of value that was transmitted to me when I thought that I was going to be exited. I thought all the discussions that were going to be had with me would be, well, actually, John, you've been a very good guy, but there's no real way you can possibly return to doing what you've done before. Wasn't the message I was given. I was given a message that actually you have been valued, and what can we do as an organisation to get you back on your feet?
But do you think that I can't imagine that was typical at the time, particularly not in the sort of the hard-bitten culture of the City of London? Do you reckon?
Well, I think that was. The issue was that actually there was a lot of help available even then. The issue was, and some of the things that I've gone on to do since, was that there was very little culture of talking about it. So the good news was that my return to work was dealt with extremely well. The bad news was that in the 18 months leading up to that crisis, I was actually beginning to suffer with what I now know to be symptoms of stress-related depression and anxiety. But we didn't have a culture within the organisation of talking about that. I didn't recognise.
Is that different now? Do you think things have changed?
There is a way to go in all organisations, but there's definitely a move towards much more awareness, and I am pretty certain that I would have got help earlier now.
Well, I have to say, I think the fact that we have a chief constable and a senior partner from Deloitte in a studio talking about mental health, I doubt that would have happened even a few years ago. So thanks very much to both of you. Nigel is on the line. Nigel in London Bridge. Hello.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nigel. What's your experience?
Well, thanks for bringing this subject up, because, as you say, it needs discussing widely, more widely than we're doing at the moment. But progress is there. The first thing that becomes pretty obvious from one listening to your people phoning in is we are fragile, and we don't really understand that. And the gentleman from Deloitte is a prime example of the pressures and the way our way of living creates for us. We seem to be tending towards the American view, where we now have a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day society. Human beings weren't meant to work that way. We have high working hours, pressurised working conditions, poor pay, low job expectancy, and a lot of long-term employees, all of which creates pressures in the society that we've got. I've had the opportunity in my life to observe both my mother being mentally ill with schizophrenia and a very dear friend who suffered bipolarity. So my mother took me through the 60s and 70s until we got to the dismantling of the institutions that Mrs. Thatcher watched over, but in my opinion, without the funding coming into the community that was what was promised at the time, but has never seemingly come, not enough of it anyway. And part of what goes with that is the inability to express ourselves as a society, that our way of living so much of this.
Yeah, no, well, I certainly think, Nigel, I think you speak for everybody when you say that speaking out about mental health is clearly something that makes a considerable difference, and certainly makes those who dealing with mental health issues feel less isolated. Can I just go to another caller? John in Belfast. Hello, John.
Good evening, Mr. Clegg. I was just interested to know what your take is on the mental health services in the military. I'm all for helping people in civil life. I am a 17-year veteran of 6 tours, operational tours, including Afghan and Iraq. While I was in Bosnia, I'm old enough to be in Bosnia, and I was medically discharged for post-traumatic stress. And it turned out that the mental health services were incredibly poor. And especially after Afghanistan, the physical health services, if you lose a leg, and rightly so, you get the world given to you. The mental health services is very unfashionable, and there is a massive stigma. And
still is, in your view, John?
Traumatic stress. It was just bunged into an anxiety disorder.
John, I mean, I was in Colchester just last week, speaking to veterans. I mean, you would have recognised what they were saying to me at the time, that being discharged, then trying to find their feet in civvy street, stress that help. But I think you're absolutely right, John. It's something, and of course, and you know this better than I do, people who are paid and trained to defend themselves, do brave things, put their life on the line, are often not inclined to actually go and reach out for help once they're discharged. So it is clearly, but the time right now has just gone 7:47.
This is Adam Moore in the LBC Travel Centre. Well, Southern trains have delays of up to 45 minutes on their services out of London Bridge to East Croydon and Crystal Palace. That's because of a signalling fault at Sydenham. That's also affecting Thameslink services. In Leighton, the A12 southbound, still a lane blocked after an accident involving two vans at the Lee interchange. That's causing some queues. Camden Town, you're slow on Camden Road, a lane out both ways there because the traffic lights have stopped working at the junction with Royal College Street. In Peckham Road heading eastbound, a lane shut there after some scaffolding fell onto a bus between Lyndhurst Way and Bellenden Road. Delays still tonight in Leicestershire. The M1, the southbound side, remains closed. It's been shut for most of the afternoon after a serious accident earlier just past the Catthorpe interchange at junction 19. That's causing long delays at the moment. Queues all the way back up towards Leicester. Keeping you moving. Your next travel update is in half an hour.
LBC Travel.
With Go-To Meeting. Work smarter with a free 30-day trial.
Mum! Yes? There are penguins in my room!
Nobody wants to wake up to a chilly home. So if your boiler breaks down, it's good to know that British Gas engineers are only a phone call away. And that 92% of our surveyed homes...
Just thought I'd add a bit more drama there so you wouldn't forget. Search Sky Bundles to join online today. Sky. Believe in better.
Sky TV from £21.50 per month. Direct debit subject to status. £10 standard setup. Upfront payment required. Sky Go requires 3G, 4G or Wi-Fi. UK and ROI only. Minimum contract and further terms apply.
My transit van. It's where I've got everything I need. Floral foam, stub and rose wires, buckets, trays, secateurs, stem tape and half a packet of cheese and onion crisps. Same with new Ford Transit Centres. I know everything I need is there too. They're dedicated, so these guys know Ford vans inside out. Expert advice on choosing the right vehicle, help with finance, support to keep me on the road. I can count on it all. They're nationwide and open late, so I'm never far from the services I need when I need them. New Ford Transit Centres in a few words. Specialist sales, service and repairs. It's all in.
To the wheelbarrow race winners and the Sunday League smashers, the chainsaw juggling champions and the sword scoffing masters, to the triathletes, the mathletes, to all of our fellow number ones, we say, boom! You did it, and so did we.
O2 has been ranked #1 network for customer service satisfaction by Ofcom for the 6th time in a row. O2, be more dog.
The Vista of Venice, recognised throughout the world. But add in the sounds of the Grand Canal at first light, and it's unforgettable. It's these small finishing touches that make a huge difference. For the ultimate finishing touch for your home, use SureSet's permeable paving. Guaranteed for 15 years, it adds a classic touch to your home. Stunning, permeable paving from SureSet. To find out more, visit suresetfinish.com. Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
In the next hour, we'll be continuing the conversation on mental health and getting more of your reactions on the phone. And at 9, it's the Money Hour. This week, advice on selling, buying and renting a property. Plus, we'll be debunking the myths that surround what affects your credit history.
Leading Britain's conversation, Clive Bull. This evening from 8 on LBC.
So yes, that's Clive Bull coming up after 8 o'clock here on LBC. He'll continue to take your calls and reactions on what you've heard here with me, but there's still just under 10 minutes or so left to take your calls on how we as a country can better deal with all the issues that mental health throws up. So give me your perspective by calling on 0345 6060 973 and text on 84850. But let's first turn to Sarah, who's in Long Crendon. Hello, Sarah.
Hello there.
Hi, Sarah. What's your experience?
My son, who's now 18, has been suffering from mental health issues since he was about 12. And I was kind of wanting to ask you how you thought maybe the children's mental health service could be improved, because I have to say, having used it for 6 years with my son, we very quickly realised that we basically had to keep him alive until he got to 18, where he could actually be treated the way he needed to be treated.
That's interesting, Sarah. Can you, now that he's turned 18, are you now happier with the care he's receiving?
The care that he's receiving now, because he now has GP-based care, in the point as he's actually on medication now and not just being talked better, it's improving, but he's still very, very ill because he's had 6-8 years of untreated mental health problems.
Oh, I'm very, very sorry to hear that, Sarah. Paul Farmer, the Chief Executive of Mind, is with me here this evening. You might want to make an observation. My observation, actually, Sarah, is unfortunately sometimes it's also the other way around, that sometimes I speak to parents whose children they feel have been better attended to and treated in children's mental health services and then are somewhat left to their own devices as adults. But you clearly have, or your son has experienced the reverse, which must have been, and it must be very distressing. But Paul, what's your observation about this distinction between child and adult mental health services?
Yes, hello, Nick. It's an odd distinction, isn't it, that we decide that at 17 years, 364 days, you need a particular set of services, and at 18 years, 1 day, you get another set of services. So I think the whole, ideally, we want support for people to be as joined up as possible. And it is often the case, you're right, that we hear people telling us that the children's services they receive are better than the adult services. So it's interesting to hear Sarah's experience in that respect. But really, this is surely all about joining them up, so that these divides aren't so kind of such a chasm between one set of services and another.
Sarah, how have you coped as a mum?
I think it's completely and totally life-changing. I mean, I had to leave work to become my son's full-time carer. At one point, I used to get 4 3-hour sessions of respite a year, but that stopped 3 years ago. So I don't get any respite. My youngest son's a young carer. He sometimes goes to the young carers meetings, but that doesn't happen very often anymore either.
Well, so Sarah, I hope known for 40-odd years. She's in her early 80s, and it's impossible to file a complaint that isn't treated with disdain and contempt. And this includes the Court of Protection, which is like something out of Kafka. It really is the most wretched organisation. And what I would do is to ask you if you could set up a complaint system that is detached from all these people, that is not involved with people who are involved with the case and the complaint and the crisis.
Paul, is that something? Sorry to interrupt, Peter. I'm just very keen to hear from Paul whether there's something you've heard about before.
So I think one of the issues about getting the right kind of support, particularly for people who are lacking capacity, which is where the Court of Protection comes in, is to make sure that their complaints are really properly heard. And in other parts of the health service, I think we've learnt the lessons from the Francis Review, and I think there's still more to be done in mental health to make sure that people just get the right kind of protection and support that they need when things aren't going as they should.
Because clearly, Peter, thank you very much, Peter. Forgive me that I would like to move on because other people are keen to ring in as well, but thank you for ringing in. Louise in Ashford. Hello, Louise.
Hello there.
Hi.
Yes, I wanted to just say a good story that came out right.
Oh, good.
I was trained as a physiotherapist, lost my career at 23, was told I would never work again, was in the system for 30 years. I'm now out of the system, earning my own living fully, and I'm also the recovery champion for Kent Meadow Partnership Trust. I do a lot of work around recovery and that it's able to happen. And we're working towards getting more and more peer support workers in who've got lived experience to support those who have mental health problems. And good work is out there. Staff try their best. But with all the cuts and all the pressures, the Cinderella service it's very, very hard. I work with Kent Medway partly on a voluntary basis, partly as self-employed, and we've got a long, long way to go.
We do.
But there is hope out there for people.
Well, Louise,
I truly believe that.
Sorry to butt in, but it's because for so many people this is a story of despair and isolation. So it's absolutely wonderful to hear your story, and I strongly agree with you that over time we've got to. I'm afraid we can't do it overnight. We've got to reverse this long history of treating mental health as a Cinderella service and instead give it the esteem and the resources that it deserves. On that note, Paul, obviously there's a bit of a culture change going on. People are talking about mental health more. What needs to happen next, in your view?
So I think you're right. We've seen the last few years where people are really openly talking about mental health as an issue. And as you've heard from your last caller from Louise, I think the solution here is to listen to the people who have their own experiences and really put the responsibility into the hands of people with their own experiences of mental health problems. And I think if the last 5 years are characterised by years of awareness, and that awareness is hugely elevated and public attitudes are changing, the next 5 years are going to be all about action, providing the right kind of help and support to people at the right time when they so desperately need it.
Well, I strongly agree with that. And Paul, you're going to stay here because I think you'll be able to continue the conversation with Clive. I've hugely enjoyed my first solo outing as a presenter here on LBC. Thank you to everyone who's got in touch. A special thanks to everyone who shared their experiences with me on air. Not easy on this subject, and I'm sorry that I haven't been able to get to all of you. All of this will be put up as a free podcast on lbc.co.uk. Duncan Barks is with you from 10 this evening, but up next it's Clive Bull.
Nick, thank you very much. And coming up after the news, we do indeed continue the conversation. I see a full switchboard, and it's been a fascinating hour. You've been hearing Nick Clegg's exploration of mental health issues, and we will continue that conversation by taking your calls on 0345 6060 973. And later on, after 9, it's the Money Hour. This week we're looking at property with advice from property expert Ed Mead, and we'll be looking particularly at predictions that the private rented sector is expecting a big surge.